So who cares for babies in England? Childcare provision in England is very expensive. As you can see on the bottom bullet point on the slide, we've tried to translate the cost into Hong Kong dollars. So around 57 Hong Kong dollars per hour is the average nationally in England for babies. But in London, we're from the southeast of England, just outside London. In London, it's much, much more expensive and can be as much as 3 times that figure. So what kind of childcare are we talking about? Childcare provision in England is mostly offered by private sector providers, private companies, corporations. Childcare is big business. More than 70% of the provision for daycare is in the private sector, and the rest is in the voluntary sector or is owned and managed by the state. So provision may be in day nurseries, which offer group-based care in centres, or it may be by childminders. You may call them home carers, who provide care for small groups of children in their own home, in the childminders' homes. And both of these types of care are regulated by the regulator Ofsted, which is the Office for Standards in Education in England, and have to be registered with that provider, and registered also to deliver what we call the early years foundation stage, which is not officially a curriculum, but is in practice a curriculum. But we should also acknowledge that some parents make use of informal childcare arrangements, as I'm sure is the case here in Hong Kong too. Family members as far as possible, sometimes friends, neighbours. Some will employ au pairs from other countries, or some might employ nannies, some of whom are trained. And the first of those themes was environments. And through a variety of different kinds of activities that we took on with the practitioners, together with them, we asked questions about environments. For example, what does a baby room look like? What do your baby rooms look like if you have them? Do all baby rooms look the same? And if so, why? If not, why not? What is valued in a baby room? And what isn't? Why? Why not? Those kinds of questions were beginning to get our practitioners to talk to each other, to compare, to share, and to begin to think about what kinds of theories or philosophies might underpin their practice. In England, there's an abundance, for example, of dangly mobiles from the ceilings in baby rooms. You look up and there are hundreds of things hanging down, and we asked our practitioners, why do you have these dangly things in your baby rooms? Where does the idea come from for dangly things? The walls in many of the baby rooms are covered in all manner of pictures. Sometimes there might be a cartoon theme, Mickey Mouse, Mickey Mouse, Mickey Mouse, Mickey Mouse. Or there might be lots of copies of the regulations and requirements from the foundation stage, the early years foundation stage framework, all around the world. So we asked with our practitioners, why might we have regulations around the walls of a baby room? And what relevance does this have to the babies? There might be in some baby rooms, a lot of black and white resources, and you may have encountered this, you may have heard about it. We asked our practitioners to think about the research that they felt that this resource was based upon, and how they were interpreting that research, and whether they were perhaps misinterpreting that research in the provision of a lot of black and white resources. Our participants also talked about a desire to create homely environments. Does that make sense? Do you know what I mean by homely environments? We said to them, what does homely mean? Whose home are you recreating? And by default, whose home are you not recreating? What we'd like to do is to share with you a very short clip from a film, an observation film, that is not a film that we took to judge, but was a film that we took and gave to our practitioners to ask them to reflect on their practice. So it gives you an idea of the kinds of film that we were using for reflective practice. And afterwards, Kathy's going to talk about talk. This film comes from a nursery that participated in our project and which had just been judged, visited by the regulator, Ofsted, inspected, and its provision was judged to be good, which is not at the top of the scale, but nearly at the top of the scale. The second theme that we focused upon, and that in a way is also illustrated in that film, was the theme of relationships. Another very complex area in the baby room. And of course there are obvious relationships in baby rooms that require development and nurture. For example, there's the relationships between the practitioners and the babies themselves. And you might have something to say about that in relation to that film. There's also the relationships between the practitioners and the baby's family. They're the obvious relationships. But baby room practice may also involve working with a host of other professionals. For example, speech therapists, social workers, occupational therapists. And the dynamics of those relationships also impact on the experiences that the babies themselves encounter. We became interested in those dynamics and their impact on the care, the ultimate care for babies. We were concerned by the fact in our project that baby room practice was generally a landscape hidden from view. And so in our project, what we tried to do was to push open the baby room door and see what was inside. And what we discovered was that baby room practice in England is very much in the same way that our colleagues are describing it in Hong Kong, a neglected and overlooked aspect of nursery practice. Our project findings were that those employed to care for babies were most frequently young women, the youngest women employed in nurseries, whose qualifications and experience compared unfavourably with their colleagues working with the older children in the nursery. So we found the least experienced, the least qualified, working with the youngest babies. Baby room staff in our project, and we found that this was reflected across the country, were not graduates. Their training was in service, not pre-service, and limited, and sometimes very general, and not specifying necessarily the care of babies, just early years of education. They didn't have very many opportunities for professional development of the sort that Sacha and I created, apart from mandatory and universal training in child protection, health and safety, and food hygiene. They're the three mandatory aspects of training. Those factors, combined with very long working days, that's true in Hong Kong too, I think, shift work and poor pay and conditions contributed to situations where engagement in professional dialogic exchange were virtually non-existent. In discussing the project themes of talk, environments and relationships, identities emerged as a really very prominent issue. Through the research process, we heard repeatedly that participants had low self-esteem and felt they had a lowly status compared with other nursery workers.
and other people indeed working in the education field. When we asked them to talk about their role, they defined their work through depersonalised functional activities. Participants' stories that they shared with us demonstrated rather a sense of powerlessness and reflected a sense of voicelessness. For example, we were told that parents would regularly seek out the oldest staff member or the manager when they needed to talk about their baby's needs or development, rather than talk to the baby's main carer, who, though younger, may have the most knowledge or information about their baby, reflecting the idea that age was synonymous with wisdom and knowledge. Secondly, they told us that requirements from the policy makers and regulator were frequently filtered through to them by managers who rarely gained, the baby room staff rarely gained access to first-hand information for themselves so that they could make their own decisions, for example, about the environment and how many dangly things they needed or cartoons or whatever. Thirdly, in some notable examples, parents dictated the detail of how and where and when their babies should be allowed to sleep at the nursery. In one case, we were told that practitioners were instructed by the parent to leave a baby crying in order that he learned to self-soothe, which is a very fashionable notion at the moment, to self-soothe, even though the crying, in this case, lasted for up to 20 minutes. It's a long time for a baby to cry, isn't it? And was evidently distressing for that baby, but also for the other babies, and for the carers, and for everybody in that nursery situation. But the parents were very insistent, and when some concerns were raised about that, they took their baby to another nursery and paid another nursery to look after it, who would follow their instructions. But a key finding from our work was that the people who were involved in our project, baby room workers themselves, were hungry for more information, hungry for more support, really keen to learn and develop their practice. So what about the babies then, in relation to those three project themes? Well, firstly, environments. The knowledge and understanding and conditions in which baby rooms are situated impact upon the created environment in which babies in England are spending up to 50 hours a week, which in turn influences babies' social, emotional and physical development. For example, we witnessed beautiful, purpose-built, light, airy and spacious baby rooms. Of course we did, but more commonly, we saw some rather dingy rooms for babies. So the rest of the nursery would have the good provision, but the babies were somehow in a lesser setting. We frequently saw babies in rows of high chairs at meal times, with the food could be pushed in. We saw frequently baby rooms where there was very low natural light. That's problematic, isn't it? That's all right. We often saw cluttered environments. I don't know what you thought of the environment you saw in the film, but sometimes we saw rooms that were very cluttered. We saw some very noisy spaces. We have ratios of 1 adult to 3 babies. But if there are, for example, 15 babies in a room, then there are 5 adults. And 5 adults make a lot of noise. Never mind the babies. We also saw some cramped rooms, not enough space. England's quite a small country too. We don't have enough space. Of course, these examples also say as much about society's attitude towards what's acceptable in the care of babies. What do we feel is good enough for babies, rather than the best, as they do about practitioner competence. The second theme in relation to babies was talk, and the research found that talk happened infrequently. But when it did occur, it was, perhaps as you might have noticed in the film, practitioner to practitioner talk across the heads of the babies, which was either informal chatter or task related. Pass me them, give me them, can you? Let's do this next, and so on. We saw practitioner to baby talk, but we found that was mostly regulatory. You know, come and get your nappy changed, give me your dummy, eat up, instructional, yeah? We also saw practitioner to parent talk, but very little, consisting of snatched exchanges of information at the beginning and the ends of the days, because everybody's in a hurry, aren't they? Going or coming from work. The third theme was relationships. And we found in terms of relationships that the imbalance of power often found in baby room relationships was not necessarily conducive to autonomous, collaborative, reflective practice or professional dialogic exchanges. But it was good for creating and maintaining hierarchies where baby room practitioners felt frequently disempowered. All of this meant that the practitioners retreated into task-dominated approaches to their roles. They defined their roles very clearly, which diminished their personalised responses to baby care, which is something we believe to be hugely important.